Destination mark.
What the hell is up with this? Those boxes appear a lot slower than I remember.
The original Crash Bandicoot is easily the weakest of the bunch though. Crash's limited moveset and an over-reliance on waves of enemies rather than intriguing platforming challenges makes for a rougher experience.
The original Crash holds up the least. It's still playable and it's a lot of fun, but it still doesn't go full in on the charm yet.
Why are these holograms so shit?
I mean, loading screens just feel lame and like they shouldn't be there.
This game has aged so poorly that it's borderline unplayable today.
You serious?
Oh boy, so the comeback saga. I've been singing Crash and Sane Trilogy's praises ever since it was first announced at E3 2016 and revealed at PSX 6 months later. Sure, it looked like a work in progress, cause it was. That didn't stop the fans from bashing the hell out of it though. But this isn't really about the overall fanbase's flipsy, flopsy, topsy-turvy, backwards ass views on the remastered trilogy. Part 1 of this saga is dedicated to highlighting some of the biggest points that people are complaining about while playing through this trilogy. I swear, I've been trying to get my views across for some time now, but my opinions have been incredibly overshadowed by all the negativity that's been surrounding these games. And I'm not saying that my opinion and mine only is the sole one that matters. I just want those who are willing to stick around through this entire video to just listen, absorb what I'm about to say, and think about it. And I'm sorry guys, but that means the comments will be disabled. I don't care about arguing or debating or anything like that. That doesn't interest me. I just want you all to sit back and hear me out. This goes for the other two parts as well, obviously, but we'll get there when we get there. For now, let's go! So I didn't really structure the last game chat video, seeing as I was just kind of going from point to point without much of a transition, so let's talk about some good old game design! Number 1, the music. Oh, really? This is the first thing we're going over? Okay. Alright, so as we all know, this is a remaster from the ground up, blah blah blah. I'm really not going to waste my time explaining how this trilogy came to be. We all know the story. I know it, you know it, even sweet old great-great-grandma over here knows it. So Insane Trilogy's music doesn't sound the same. I mean, it's the same songs, same tracks, same melodies, but they sound different from the versions we know from the original PS1 games. That's not necessarily what's pissing people off. What's pissing people off is how certain intricacies in these tracks seem to be missing. Josh Mansell added a lot of ambient background sounds and melodies to heighten the music and make it super atmospheric and alive. The songs also complemented the levels. Nice, serene music in the calm creek levels, creepy, off-putting music in the seemingly abandoned temple levels, tipsy-topsy, watch your step music in the dark castle levels. Everything in the soundtrack mattered. In Insane Trilogy, it seems the VV sound team wanted to go above and beyond with the soundtrack. While keeping the tunes familiar and faithful, they also took it upon themselves to add their own flourishes to the tracks, to make them feel even more alive. However, this did create something of a disconnect between the levels and their music, I will admit. Some tracks absolutely nail it, while others just feel empty. Insane's soundtrack was adjusted to better fit Crash's wacky world, and while that is a good thing on surface level, it creates a dissonance between what made the original, more underplayed soundtrack so amazing by not trying to be as bombastic as it can. Listen to Slippery Climb's music. It was super dark and foreboding in the original, but in Insane it sounds very upbeat and almost comical. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean it's bad, it just means you kinda have to take it for what it's worth. Some tracks are good and others are okay, or at the very least, a little underwhelming. It's not like we can outright demand that VV themselves change it. Although... So, I don't know who else has noticed this, and props to the VV sound team for altering this for added effect, but observe Crash 1's intro cutscene. We all know what music plays here. It's Cortex's boss theme. But listen to this part right here.
This time, I shall reign triumphant. This time, I shall reign triumphant.
Neat, huh? In the final game, they added a choir to this part of the tune for the cutscene. It's subtle, but works for the dark atmosphere of the cinematic, and for Cortex in general. But that's an instance of VV actually changing the music. Now, this is not an open call to bombard them with even more patch please, and this time asking them to add background shit to the music. I'm really bringing this up to show you that they are aware of fan feedback, and they have been changing even the smallest minute things from the initial reveal right up to before launch. So maybe they'll give the music more of that original flair, who knows. But the point is, there's no reason to bitch about it. The music sounds fine. These tracks with the missing bells and whistles are really only present in the first game. Cortex Strikes Back and Warp soundtracks are incredible. So, lesson 1, don't bitch about the music.
Number 2, the depth perception.
So this is a fucking complaint that goes as far back as the original first game, and I know at the time 3D games were new and everything, but it's fucking stupid. I don't mean to sound like that guy, you know, that guy, but I first played this game when I was like 2 or 3. I don't ever remember having issues with judging my distance between jumps over gaps or onto enemies. I mean, I was a toddler, yes, so I died a lot, but I never fussed about making my jumps. I learned how to move Crash and I just did it. Simple as that. The fact that this is still an issue to this day astounds me. Seriously, people write this off like it's a fucking issue, and they're wrong. And check out how Arlo here tries to make it sound like it's this giant problem.
Perception is an issue. When you're moving forward and the camera is behind you, it's easy to lose your concentration just a little too much and jump right into a pit, or run up to a bad guy and just completely misjudge when you should spin attack him.
Okay, clearly he's jumping and spinning way too damn early. I hate it when reviewers do this. To get their points across about bad aspects in games, when it comes to getting their gameplay B-roll, they have to make themselves die like this, to really try and drive home, yeah, this is bad. Can't you see how bad this is? Instead of, I don't know, playing and recording the game for a good stretch of time, and when those moments happen, it looks way more natural and justified. I admit, I'm guilty of a little of this in my last video, but that just means I can pick up on the bullshit all the easier. And you know I've recorded all my insane footage for this video, because I stream myself doing it on Periscope. So what you're experiencing is not difficulty, you just have to make sure that you plan your jumps a little more carefully. And I do reference that in the video. You'll see it in the video. I say that in the VO. But anyway, yes, depth perception can be a little intimidating in some levels, but that's why the camera angles change. The first level introduces you to a close-up camera angle when the mini cutscene's over. It's like this for the first 2 levels, then come the Great Gate, the first 2D side-scrolling level, the camera's pushed way back, so you get a better view of the level, and so you can see more of what's coming up ahead. Speaking of what's coming up ahead, are people still really complaining about the boulder levels? Seriously? If you haven't noticed, guys, the camera in this level is also pushed back, allowing enough space between Crash and the screen for stuff to pop into frame, and you do have enough time to react to it. Maybe not for your first ever playthrough of this level, that's understandable, but that's what these games are all about, learning by doing. You can't just knit a scarf first try thinking you'll get it down right then and there. It requires multiple meticulous sessions of fucking up first before you can even get halfway done. Or, you know, you can just be born a fucking prodigy. There's a filmmaking / stage play term you should familiarize yourselves with. It's called mise en scène. Ooh, sexy. Otherwise known as putting on stage. It basically refers to the arrangement of set pieces in a play or film, the way things are visually and physically inserted in your environment. This can stretch to games too. The next time you play a Crash level, just stop and observe where everything is placed. Usually enemy, obstacle, and pit placements aren't just thrown around to create faux difficulty. They're strategically placed to create a learning curve. Insanity Beach has 10 death pits in total, and we all know that one pit. I hate you, pit. But most players will take one look at this path and go,
No! No, 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 fuck no!
and they'll take the safer path. But if you're daring enough and have the Wumpa fruits to break all the crates down that path, that means the game will be asking of you to be careful, to proceed with caution. Pulling something like this off requires tight, accurate control of Crash, and being aware of what's going on right in front of him, aka his surroundings. Now, here it's just a straight line of crates, so this is kind of a weak example, really. But nope, you're all saying it!
As good as the game may have looked at the time, depth perception is a cruel, cruel mistress in Crash Bandicoot.
Depth perception is an issue.
Poor depth perception and a fixed camera that can't be moved at all hasn't been changed, resulting in a lot of deaths purely from having a bad perspective of the platforms.
I found myself having some trouble in really odd places, and it seriously threw me off.
The infamous boulder chase sequences when you're having to run towards the camera with no way of seeing what obstacle is coming next.
Are pits and enemies really that hard for you? Are you really not that cognizant? It's not fucking rocket science. This ain't no Dark Souls. The controls aren't that hard to learn. You don't even need this key to tell you what buttons do what actions, you can figure that out yourself. Likewise, in more scenarios than not, you'll always have time to stop and assess your surroundings before making jumps. You can figure them out yourselves. Just execute them more cleverly. But I know exactly what you're going to retaliate with. So let's move on to number 3, the jumping. Dan Tangway has said that the hardest thing to nail down was Crash's jump arc. I'm not joking when I say this, but Crash and Mario's jump arcs are pretty much what made Crash 1 and Mario 64 so successful. Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin have stated that Crash's ascent to apex to descent speed made for excellent maneuverability back in the original trilogy. It felt great to jump around as Crash. The jumping was experimented with in Crash 1, then it was altered in Crash 2, and stayed about the same for Crash 3. Meanwhile, in Sane Trilogy, Vicarious Visions try to keep true to Crash's original jump arc, but this time, again, we gotta add that flavor. They made Crash's descent faster, and it's crazy, but with this small change, and another one we'll talk about in a moment, being the physics, all 3 games changed. Jumping feels different now. It's a combination of muscle memory and familiarizing yourself with the physics all over again. You know you're supposed to make this jump, but you barely can now. And this is a small example. A bigger example can be found in Crash 1. This little tweak to the jumping instantly drove the bridge level's difficulty through the roof. Now mind you, the levels are still fucking doable, but longtime vets like myself have obviously noticed how different jump heavy levels like these ones feel in Insane. And if you don't already know the answer as to why this is, though many people have already explained it, myself included, I'll give you a brief rundown. Basically, fans have gone into Insane's files and have discovered that Crash and Coco's feet have a pill-shaped hitbox as opposed to a traditional rectangular one. This has led to players being able to do this, take an extra step off a platform to heighten their jump. But people are mainly focusing on what it does to hinder their jump. As Ding Dong from OnlyPlays shows here, not just platforms, but really any ledge that Crash and Coco step on can end up sliding them off. And this can result in a lot of deaths in places you know you wouldn't normally die in. And this right here, folks, is what people are complaining about. I made it seem with all this talk and footage like this is something that'll happen to you every 5 seconds, but it's not. Again, you have to be careful and more precise with your jumping and with where you land. It's really not that difficult as everyone's making it out to seem. Ugh, next number.
Number 4! The motherfucking glitches!
Okay, so BetaM found all the shit wrong with Insane when you decide to fucking break it. And yes, even I have soft-locked myself on stream twice. But this is where shit just makes no sense, and I start to get really concerned. Insane Trilogy has many glitches. It was rushed. Despite having 2 to 3 years of development time, many players have come across glitches just by playing the games. And I get it, not every game is perfect, and yeah, when glitches start to show up in weird abrupt ways and places, players get concerned. I feel ya. But when you let said glitches ruin your experience and overall outlook of the trilogy, that's when it becomes unfair to the developers. Keep in mind, these guys recreated 3 games from the ground up, in about the same time, if not less, than the original devs. I'm not at all using that as an excuse for the glitches, I'm just saying they had a lot of pressure put on them to make sure they got this right. And while all the aesthetics, character models, and yes, music were nailed down very well, it's obviously the technical side of things that took the real hit. Recreating the visuals was no real problem, seeing as they had the original games to play and go off of, plus with all the concept art, they had more than enough to nail the artistic side of Insane down to a T. But I don't know who coded what or how things went awry with this shit, but come on guys, these bugs aren't ones that can just happen. Now the ones that do just happen, well, those are a whole other story. But the player still has an active role in preventing these from occurring. I've heard stories from people where all kinds of crazy glitches in certain levels would happen. Ones that have never even happened to me. But the kicker is that, from what I remember from those stories, they just kept playing those glitched parts over and over again, expecting the problem to resolve itself, getting angry every time it didn't, and calling the game flawed because of it. Really? There are different ways to resolve this. Quit the level and go back in, restart your save file and try that, quit out to the game menu, pick Crash 1 again and try that, or pop the game out and put it back in, if you're playing a physical copy. If it's the digital version, well, nix that last one I guess. I know it's gonna suck to have to resort to that, but that's what I mean. Don't let a sour moment sour your whole experience. And it's very immature to call a game flawed because one nasty glitch prevented you from completing that level in that moment. I don't see why I have to cover this. Use common sense and don't be ignorant. Glitches can be found in pretty much any game ever. By that logic, all games are bad and flawed. But in those other games, even the baddest glitches aren't what you first think about when you start playing the games. It's about the fun you're going to have, the adventures you're about to embark on. Why can't you think of Insane that way? Oh, because they're just prettier versions of the original games you played as a kid, so you already know them front to back, and expect them to play exactly like the originals, because the originals didn't have those glitches? Well then, here's one more solution for you. Play the originals! Insane is not, and never will be, the exact same as the Naughty Dog trilogy. That's the point of remastering a game. It's about taking what we know, making it prettier, and in Insane's case, adding extra bells and whistles. Like I said, the technical side is the iffy part. But if you can acknowledge that yes, there are glitches in Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, and you refuse to try and resolve these issues yourself if they keep occurring, well, I don't know what to tell you. Just use common sense and just try to have fun. These things happen. You kind of have to deal with it. Anyway, that one got a little lengthy and serious. Let's move on to the next number. Number 5.
Wow!
So you're playing a video game that is difficult, and its review scores drop because of it?
I spent an awful lot of time dying as I got used to the controls being kind of, oh, well, I try the analog stick, oh no, it's not quite as precise as it should be, oh, I'll go back to the directional buttons, oh god, no, that's not doing what it should.
Tell me, when you played Super Meat Boy, did you ever once think to yourself, golly jeez, this game sure is hard? I'd say it's on par with fucking Dark Souls. Did you pick up Titan Souls and go, oh man, this is a doozy of a vidya game. It is exceptionally hard, no kid can play this, it's much too hard, so difficult, I kept dying over and over and over.
It's not even a curve, it's just a straight line. I mean, even from the first level, you are going straight in there, and it is relentless.
What? Insanity Beach? Are you fucking joking? Alright, so, again, this one is more directed to Crash 1, and this is where everything I've talked about culminates. The jumping, the physics, the hit detection, the fucking platforming in general, has caused everyone who's played Insane to nearly swear off Crash 1, still, after all these years, and these remastered tweaks to the saving and box cutting mechanics as the hardest in the whole trilogy. What people often forget, or don't forget but like to use as the ultimate excuse for Crash 1's difficulty, is that Crash 1 is less about speed and more about precision, concentration, pacing, reacting, pattern recognition. The biggest blatant fucking hint of this is the time trials. Vicarious Visions unify the time trials across all 3 games, and while players are having a blast dashing through Cortex Strikes Back's levels and trying to beat their old warp times from the original game, I don't see many YouTubers taking on Crash 1's time trials. Let's be real, Crash 1 was not meant to speedrun. Yet people did it anyway. Utilizing crazy techniques, one could blast the first crash in like 40 goddamn minutes. But with everything I've discussed in this video, those same speedrunners are not having a great time with Insane. They can't do the exact same things they could in the originals, and it has had an impact on them. But back to Crash 1, well, number 6. People claim Crash 1 is hard, but it really isn't. Shuhei frickin' Yoshida himself has stated that if newcomers revved up Insane for the first time, they should avoid playing Crash 1 first. And I think that's wrong. Crash 1 pioneered a lot of great game design aspects. This is where a lot of personal preferences come into play, but like I said in the beginning of this video, whatever your thoughts and opinions are, just hear me out. 3D platformers were not common in the 90s. Duh. Therefore, Naughty Dog in particular borrowed many aspects from arcade games. Yeah, you know fucking Hubert, or Pac-Man, or Sinistar, or motherfucking Bubbles? Those games were hard. But guess what? No one complained. They played, and learned by doing. It's the best kind of learning for an interactive media such as video games. See, I want to be a video game developer, so even though I have my own biases, I try my hardest to see both the good and the bad of every design aspect in every game I play. You look at Crash 1 and claim the saving is bullshit because you can only do it when you get a gem, or when you beat a bonus round, Mad Pat.
In the original game, remember, they expected you to have to play levels perfectly in one try just to even save the game.
But I see a great incentive for experienced Crash players who have evolved beyond the basics, who want to challenge themselves by breaking all the crates, or at the very least want to save their game by beating the bonus rounds and not by using passwords, something borrowed from arcade games by the way. And while you see the box count mechanic as flawed because you can't die once, I see it as a neat, clever way to keep the gameplay interesting by demanding that you grow, that you get better, and you can only get better by playing the damn game! It's up to you to kill all the enemies and smash all the crates, it's up to you to grow as a player and start taking on the gems, it's up to you to get the keys to unlock the 2 secret levels if you want 100% completion, and it's usually your fault for dying. The game doesn't hide behind much bullshit at all. People often forget games at a time used to just be like this. And games such as Meat Boy or Titan Souls evolved from games like Crash and Rayman, or hell, even Pac-Man and Hubert or whatever. And yes, all this time in number 6, I've been talking about the original Crash 1, not Sane Trilogy's Crash 1. People have been saying this shit about it since the very beginning, so I'm attempting to put it to rest. Games are supposed to be about having fun, but more importantly, they're also about growth. The more you play a game, the better you get at that game. And it just annoys me that people think they can just pick up Insane and go, oh yeah, I know these games, this will be a walk in the park. And then when the game knocks them on their ass, they, well, do this. Even I wasn't 100% confident that I was just going to blast through all the games with no problems. From my experiences with the GameStop and E3 demos, I died quite often. I knew things weren't going to be the exact same. So guess what? I played, and I played, and I learned, and I won. All over again 20 years later. You can do it too. Just don't think too hard about it. If things get a little too ragey, just step away, cleanse yourself, and try again. What the fuck is this Zen-ass cleanse yourself shit? Look, it's a fucking video game about a rat in shorts. Just play it and have fun. In my humble opinion, Crash Insane Trilogy hit all the points for me as a Crash fan, and went above and beyond my expectations. Sure, it's got a lot of room for improvement, but it's a kick-ass reminder of what made this franchise so great to begin with. And if you want to voice your opinions about all this, well, I disabled the comments, but you are free to make a response video. The only advice I'd give to you on that is to be careful and clever on how you approach and word these kinds of themes. Take it from me that when you voice yourself, I promise you, you may just attract the attention of the very people who made the game you're talking about. Vicarious Visions, if you guys see this, you're awesome. If you have anything else related to Crash up your sleeves, I for one cannot wait to see what it is. After all, this is only the start of Crash's comeback. And on that note,